Before we get into this episode, I just want to tell you guys that this episode is brought to you by Africa's premium online poker and sports betting platform, pokerbet.co.za. So make sure to subscribe down below. You can follow the link below, create an account, and join in on the fun. Have a kick-ass time.
Cameron Saaiman, ladies and gentlemen. Cameron Saaiman taking care of business. Wow. That look says it all.
So we have the first ginger on the show.
Yeah, it's great.
It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. And we were chatting a little bit online about your on Instagram and on WhatsApp on your amazing experience that you had in New York, going for Super Sport to cover the UFC. Just talk us a little bit through, because I do think out of a technical standpoint, being behind the scenes all the time, I do think you find a new appreciation for what the UFC has done. So just chat about us.
Absolutely.
About that.
Cam, thanks for having me on. I think the fact that I'm the first ginger, can I do I get a name or a plaque or something?
You'll get a Buffelsfontein brandewijn.
Even better, even better.
But you have to drink it just squin, just like clean.
All right, we can do that. What's it? No, it's not Puzza Thursday. Okay, anyway, no, thanks, man, for having me on, and congrats on everything. I've been privileged to watch your career flourish, and this is only the beginning, and I'm enjoying the podcast. And I think the way you're marketing yourself and going about it, congrats, man. Keep up the incredible work. Thanks. Really, it's great. I think New York 295 was my first UFC experience, and we were talking before this about how, yes, there's Cameron on TV and we all get a bit nervous. Dricker's fights on the UFC and we're watching it on SuperSport, and it's like, oh my goodness, like we're nervous. But when you're actually there, even if it's not a South African on the card, I mean, Tom Aspinall takes the fight on 2 weeks' notice and he's up against the giant from Russia and Pavlovich, and he sort of just smashes him. It's just the beauty of MMA. But how the UFC does things, I now get what you said. The levels, there's absolutely levels. And as a rights holder, we will be able to go backstage. I mean, you guys take it for granted. Joe Rogan interviews you after a fight. You're like, oh, it's Joe Rogan, but for us, even though I'm not the biggest Joe Rogan fan, my cameraman he's like a major fan. And he's like, oh my God, it's Joe Rogan. I'm like, cool, whatever. Not because, just purely, I was more of a fear factor than a UFC Joe Rogan fan. You get to see how everything operates, and it's a well-oiled machine. They look after you guys incredibly well, from the media day through to the official weigh-ins to the ceremonial weigh-ins to how it operates. It's a wonderful organization, and I think hopefully in Toronto we get to see a very different UFC in terms of Drickus lifting, his hand and having the belt around his waist. But now that I've seen it, how they do it, it's very interesting, and hopefully we can put some of that back into like the Versus or the EFC at some point. Just the way they do things. It's not rocket science, but it's done properly and it's done consistently well.
Yeah, and I do think it's insane. I remember with the first maybe 3 or 4 Versus events, after every single event, I was so stressed. I was so sick. I was just like, it's terrible, and they do it every single weekend. And then I think that type of consistency also forces you to have a well-oiled machine, like you said. And was it fun getting to work? Because, the UFC staff are so nice. Was it also cool to see how they do things in terms of their media exposure?
I think what blew my mind was the amount of media. I mean, what it's like here. We have 2 or 3 media, sometimes maybe a little bit more, depending on what event it is, if it's EFC or a Versus. There's not. When I got to the sort of roof where they were hosting the media day at the official UFC hotel in New York, just off Times Square, which blew my mind. It was Times Square.
Yeah.
Holy shit. It was like,
Was that your first time there?
No. So my first time in 2018, a South African businessman flew me and Raymond, my cameraman, out to LA. And we had a stopover in New York. And we were in New York for 4 hours. We were like, okay, we have to be back in 3 hours. A lovely old lady helps us get directions, which station. all the way to B&H, which is this camera electronics store in New York. This is the only one.
Our cameraman is shaking his head.
Absolutely, it's the mecca, absolutely. Yeah. So Ray had to get a camera there, and I was like, oh, what is this? I'm like, I'm bored. But anyway, I respected the fact because it's a well-oiled machine. It's an incredible business. So we get there, and then I'm like, I'm going to Central Park, I don't care, and Times Square. I'm done, and that's non-negotiable. And we've just got off a 16-hour flight in economy, and Ray's 6'3". I'm average height, but you know how it is.
Yes,
it's not front of the bus. So we get to New York, and we rushed around, and then we hopped on a plane for 6 hours to LA, and we did a rugby story in LA where they're using rugby to uplift these communities of kids who are involved with gangs and violence and also drugs and that sort of thing. And they're introducing rugby in Southwest LA to uplift these kids. And it's through the ISEF program. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. Shout out to Lisa Finnegan. She's doing a tremendous job down there.
Yeah.
And these kids are getting scholarships because of rugby.
Wow.
Can you believe it? Yeah. In LA. It's fascinating. So that was the first time, 2018. This was my first New York. Like arrived on the Monday, walked around, and what immediately struck me was the noise. Obviously, there's noise. The incredible buildings. The skyscrapers are like, what? Like how?
Yeah.
Empire State Building. You're like how? And they change. They change the colors on the daily.
That's insane.
Every day they change the colors. It's a theme. So when we got there, it was green and gold. So I was like, gee, they knew about the Springboks.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was the 20th or 25th anniversary of Elf, the movie, or whatever it was. I was like, oh, man.
Okay.
It would have been cool, though.
That's so cool.
And then the next thing that hit me was the weed.
Oh.
You walk around New York, and they are just like waft weed everywhere from early in the morning. So it was November, so it's quite crisp, about 12, 10 degrees. And because the time difference, I was up at about 4 looking for coffee, and coffee shops only open at 5, so not great. But you walk around, and there's this waft of weed everywhere. Yeah. So 9 months ago, they legalized weed. Guys are lighting up like from 4 or 5 in the morning, and you're like getting
that
secondhand weed,
420 spliff in.
Zulu Rosemary was cooking in New York. Okay. But incredible place. I think we walked a crap load in New York. You just walk. Terrible mic technique. Apologies. Yeah. Sorry, I'm supposed to be,
No worries.
We just walked and we saw amazing things. And I mean, it's so much history. It's one of the most, if not the most famous city in the world.
Yes.
I highly recommend it. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But phenomenal experience.
And the fights itself, because you were, I think being on a New York card is being lucky, but that card especially, that was an insane card.
That's awesome.
Just out of a media perspective, it's probably very hard for you to I'm guessing you don't have to stay biased, but you probably have some of your favorite fighters, and you have some guys that you want to probably win those fights. Going there, do you have to keep it like on the down low, or can you pick your guys?
No, you have to obviously stay as sort of objective as possible, but we actually all be human beings. We subjective human beings, as just by nature. So the fact that it was Madison Square Garden, which is the mecca of fight sports, let's be honest. I mean, Muhammad Ali, we did a tour in Madison Square Garden, and it was, Monster looked after us incredibly well there, the team, and we did Madison Square Garden. We watched a hockey game. We watched the New York Rangers. I'm now a Rangers fan just because I went to the game against the Minnesota Wild. I couldn't see the puck. It was so fast, but it was an incredible experience. I mean, the DJ plays clap your hands. Everyone's clapping their hands, and then there's a karaoke, and then it was Veterans Day weekend, so they had like former generals and soldiers all stand up in the crowd, and they went mad.
They enjoy a show.
So the hype was there before UFC 295. So I was already like a kid in a candy store vibe. And then you look at the card, and I'm going like, John Jones, Stipe Miocic would have been the ultimate, because even though John Jones would have destroyed him, he is the greatest of all time. Yeah. Stipe is probably one of the greatest heavyweights the UFC's ever had, right? Yeah. And that would have been the icing on the cake. But then you had a Tom Aspinall against Pavlovich, and then Prohashka against Pereira. And I was like, and then Mackenzie Dern, just because she's hot, you're like, go Mackenzie, but she got her ass whipped, unfortunately. But the fact of the matter is, yes, you do lean towards certain athletes. Yeah. Obviously, what Pereira has done in the middleweight and now in a light heavy, and he comes out in his traditional sort of indigenous garb. It's amazing. Then Aspinall's just a cool story. Like, he was never meant to beat this Russian.
Yeah.
He's taken the fight on 2 weeks' notice. He was on the beach. He
was injured as well,
you know, and like in the media day, he just spoke of like, what an opportunity. MSG, I mean, 295. It's the biggest show of the year, arguably.
Yes.
So I'm stoked he won, and we had English journos with us. So in Madison Square Garden, the acoustics is amazing.
Yeah.
Guys who are like audiophiles would love it because they have rock. They have something on there every day of the year. Believe it or not.
Okay.
Billy Joel. Then they had what's the comedian's name? Bill Burr.
Bill Burr, yeah.
Bill Burr was on. Then they had ice hockey. Then they had a Knicks game. Then they had UFC. Then they had ice hockey. Then the Knicks game. It was mad.
Yo, okay.
So Madison Square Garden as a venue, if you can, and I'm letting a secret out here, their ice stays frozen the whole year round. And they literally put a covering over their ice the whole year. They just lift it for hockey, put on a basketball court. Concert.
I think T-Mobile does that as well in Vegas.
Amazing.
So they keep the ice, but then it gets lowered down with a suspension, and then they build on top of that.
Incredible.
And then they just rise it again.
I've still got to go to T-Mobile.
Yes, you have to.
And then you go to Madison Square Garden and it's a UFC event, and you're like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm pinching myself walking in here.
Yeah.
But just before the event, when the ceremonial weigh-ins were being done, we got a call to say, like, from Neve of the UFC, the PR and comms, and she's like, where are you guys? I'm like, no, we're coming for the weigh-ins. We're going to sit and watch the weigh-ins. She's like, no, come with us. So I said, why? She's like, Dana White has got a media scrum. So you guys are going to be interviewing Dana White. So I was like, oh my God, what? You know, this is the next level. So all the rest of the media go into the main theater to watch the weigh-ins, and we like VIPs backstage and you get it done.
Writing down questions as you walk
I was
backstage.
Like, my mind was going at like 2 million miles an hour, and the jet lag and the weed. Maybe the weed made me a bit more relaxed, you know, just walking through it. But it was an incredible experience, and I just think they put on such a good show. And when you hear the sort of it's time and we're live and all those things, you're going like, oh my word, it's incredible. But in the media section, you can sit outside to watch most of the fights on the big screen, and then the athletes come through and you interview them, which you've experienced. Or you could be in like what they call like a skybox on the ledge, which is high up, and you watch down, which is great. So I tried to watch from everywhere. And then we actually had tickets. And I mean, we were like, I would probably say 50 meters from the octagon. So really good seats. Yeah. And then you soak up the atmosphere, and you're like, what a privilege it is to be here right now and appreciate this, because we're all MMA fans, we're UFC, we're Versus, we're UFC fans. And now I've, got to sit and experience it live and see it. It was just incredible. And I'm actually glad the first one I did, there wasn't a South African on the card. Yes. And that's meant with all due respect, because I can't wait to see you guys fight live. I've seen you in the UFC. I haven't seen you in the UFC, and I'll get my chance. But this was like a total neutral experience. Yeah. Just as a fan of the promotion and how they did things. And Madison Square Garden, New York, it was a dream come true. Like, if I had to like not go to another UFC, I would have I'd be quite chuffed that I'd done it properly.
Yeah, that's
so awesome. But it was amazing.
That's very cool. Off camera, just like shifting to different sports, because the amount of the scope that you do research on it is quite impressive, because you jump just like the Madison Square Garden needs to jump from show to show. You jump from sport to sport, and your schedule off camera. You were mentioning working with Banyana as well. Do you have a lot of time researching these people beforehand? I know you've been in the industry for years
100 years now.
Yeah,
but feels like it sometimes.
Is there almost a mental approach to preparing for these types of engagements where you either need to interview them, cover their stories? How do you go about that?
I think the biggest thing is you have to be aware of what's happening. And I think that's the starting point, because it's there's so much happening in sport, and from Springboks winning World Cups to Banyana winning Africa Cup of Nations, Proteas, swimmers, Olympics, whatever it is, you have to just sort of absorb all that knowledge. And that's something you learn over the years. Obviously, the internet helps a lot, because you can research within a few seconds. You have a lot of your info. But a lot of it's also based on understanding the athletes, their performance, and how they interact with the media in general. I'm very fortunate. I've got some great relationships, a great network that I've had over the years. And I think it's all about reading the room. So I like to always say, like, it's the IQ, EQ thing.
Yeah.
So I always joke, I'm like low IQ-ish, higher EQ-ish
Yes.
sort of thing. And people take the piss, my family in particular, say, oh, you the Dorfolk. And,
Yeah.
anyway. But that EQ plays a role in how you read people. And also, like, being a professional athlete, as you well know, is difficult. It's like you've got the pressure, external, internal pressure.
Yeah.
You're dealing with injuries, you're dealing with all sorts of things, travel, that sort of thing. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I think it's just something I've learned over the years. So I don't know if that actually answers your question, but I feel that by just keeping tabs of what's happening, social media helps a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of social media, believe it or not. I think it can be quite toxic at times. So I dial out of social media a lot. I'll dial in when I really feel like I need to. And then I have my sort of alerts that come up. And that's how I stay on top of things. But also get to a point where an athlete will text you and say, hey, this is the deal. So there's a lot that goes into it. And over the years, I've been privileged that that's worked for me.
What does a day-to-day look like? How much time do you spend on physical research? Do you guys have a team that you discuss that together with? And then after that, do you travel for shoots? Because you are also between the podcast, between shooting stuff for Super Sports, doing interviews, and then the research. What does a day-to-day usually look like for you?
It's actually quite disorganized, if I'm perfectly honest, because we get to a point where we'll need to sort of get ahead of things in a way. And it's kind of like you sort of try and plan ahead for things that are happening. And we get to a point now where you've been in the game a long time. You kind of preempt, not preempt as such, but you have an idea of a team's playing, the build-up, that sort of thing. So there's a little bit of research. There is a lot of logistics involved because to pick up a camera, set it up, and that takes time. And people are like, oh, no, it's so easy. You just put up a camera and you shoot.
Yeah.
And then CS interviews them and it's done. We edit and it's done. And I've got a phenomenal team. Ray and Steve are tremendous. Don't tell them. Can we edit that out, please?
You guys are amazing.
I'm joking. They make my life so much easier. And their job, as they say, is to make me look good. And they definitely do. And in return, as that mutual respect, I make sure that we have athletes available, we have proper times, we get to training sessions so they can film the best visuals possible to make the story look good. And at the end of the day, you're telling a story. Yeah. And that's what it boils down to. And you're telling it to an audience who doesn't have the luxury of being able to sit next to Cameron Saaiman or, if it's Sias Khaleesi or whoever it is, and Matt Sates, so the list goes on. So you have to bridge that gap. And that's where we find ourselves. So it's a little bit helter-skelter at times, like Oscar Pistorius, oh my God, he's going to be released from parole. Quickly get someone, okay, no, they don't want to talk. They don't want to talk. Quickly drive to Pretoria, go and, it gets a bit helter-skelter.
So you need to, you can't plan too far ahead as well.
No, I wish I could.
Also, organizing guests for the podcast that you have, or even like scheduling training sessions, which can quickly swap and change. Athletes are also quite disorganized. Like they have training schedules.
Absolutely.
Injuries come up, stuff like that. So you have
personal,
to,
whatever it is. Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to move on the fly.
All the time. So like people are always like, yeah, but you have such a great job. And I'm like, yes, we're very privileged to have the job we have. And we're doing it as long as we do it. It's amazing. But things change at the drop of a hat and you have to be adaptable and you have to be able to, and luckily I've got a great team. And, I've got some wonderful relationships with athletes that you can, and just general people. I mean, with a podcast in particular, I'm like, hey, that person inspires me. Let me reach out to them and speak to them. Or, it's not just always about sport. Like I'd say 10% is lifestyle, current affairs sort of stuff. But in general, it's just about relationships and keeping them and the mutual respect that comes from that. Yeah,
definitely. With the podcast as well, because I've had the pleasure of being on your podcast.
Yeah, you'll be back.
I really hope so. And the studio is amazing. Your team is absolutely.
Thank you.
They are insane with the type of the quality in which they do everything.
We're very fortunate.
Yeah, it's awesome. Do you have like do you work in a structure when it comes to guests, having certain type of people on there, or is it more of like people you find interesting, people the team find interesting? How does that work?
I'm completely selfish because I decide.
Okay.
So it's it's generally people I find inspiring, people who I am intrigued by and who I feel I want to find out more, because in my career, you kind of editorially get dictated to in that these are the parameters. You tell your story, right? Yeah. And the podcast, as you well know, it's free for all. Yeah. You really can. And it's based on that trust. So how much that person trusts, how relaxed they feel, if the aircon's working, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They don't want to run out the door.
Apologies about that.
No, that's all right. My deodorant's working today. It comes down to that sort of, once again, that safe space that you create. And that's what I've tried to create with the podcast. Because let's be fair, everyone has a podcast these days. Yeah. And the trick with a podcast is to be technically sound, consistent, and have relevant content. And if you're meeting all those sort of boxes, that audience grows, because YouTube is an incredible monster. iTunes, Spotify, wherever you land. Yeah. The fact is, it's just about growing and being consistent, because it pays nothing right now. Yes. We're not all Joe Rogans who can get 500 million or whatever it is. We'd all love to, just podcast, but it's a grind and it costs money. And people don't realize, like, it costs money to make good content.
It is. Yeah. It
really does.
It is expensive. But also just, I think, getting the opportunity to pick someone's brain for 40 minutes to an hour.
Absolutely.
And getting people to tell their story as well. It is quite interesting to see. We actually had a young entrepreneur on just before you from Old School, the Old School brand, and how he got to talk about just how he would just basically jump off a cliff and learn how to build a plane on the way down. He would he was a chartered accountant.
Okay.
And then they asked him, like, who's going to be head of the marketing team? And he's like, I'll do it. And then he had to figure that out, So it's interesting to hear how all of these guys come from different backgrounds and build to where they are now. And that being said, with all the guests and all the people that you have gotten to work with, is there one person that immediately comes to mind when it comes to who inspired you the most when interviewing them?
That's an interesting one. I think, over the years, and I'll answer your question now, but over the years, I've been very fortunate to work with some incredibly talented broadcasters. And I will say this until the day I die: broadcasters are not made, they're born. Yeah. End of story. Like, all due respect to people who are in that space, there are guys and girls that get it and are natural, and there are people that force it, and you can see straight away. And it's not a slight on them at all. They must continue doing it, because I think the more you do it, the better you get, the more comfortable. But in that time, I've seen people, and forgive me for name dropping, but like, I'm starting off with Rian van Heerden at Tux FM, a genius, an absolute genius. He's not everyone's cup of tea, but he knew how to tell a story, to hold an audience there on radio, how he interacted with people. He just put on a show. And he's someone I still want to get on the podcast. He was meant to be on, but we're getting there in terms of scheduling. Yeah. Then working with a guy like Gareth Cliff, who for 7.5 years or 7 and a bit years, we had this incredible breakfast show. And we made it up as we went. We had an incredible team, and we just had fun. And he told a story. He wasn't everyone's cup of tea. He was controversial, a shock jock, if you like. I don't like that term, but he was phenomenal at keeping people there. And when you hear someone say, I didn't want to get out my car and go to work because I wanted to hear what you guys were going to say next, or when someone calls in and says, you guys spoke about this and I mentioned that at work and this and this and this happened, it is the ultimate feather in the cap. Yeah. So those people that inspire me in my sort of start of my career to where we are now, the same people that I look to now when I get them on the podcast. Gareth, we've had on. Anele was incredible. DJ Fresh. I mean, these are all people who are doing great things in the industry. So to answer your question, it's about everyone's different and everyone's been unique in what they bring. But I just love it when people are real. We had Casta Semenya on. Yes. And what stood out for me was she was just herself. Like, I was expecting, when she walked in, I'm like, I've followed her story for like the last 10 years and I'm not quite sure how to, I'm this ginger dude who's pulling her into here, and
so she was like shy but all smiling, super friendly.
Absolutely. And she just opened up. So the fight she's been through to get to where she is today is inspirational. So everyone has little bits of inspiration they bring. So to give you one particular person would be very difficult, but I've been privileged to have some really cool guests that put that fire back in the belly,
Yeah.
which I think is important, especially in podcasting.
Yeah, you mentioned Gareth Cliff as
Mm.
well, and the breakfast show was when you guys did that.
Mm.
Was it something that just started out of the blue? Was it just a conversation being had and be like, "Listen, let's go ahead and do this," or
Yeah,
what is the thought process of doing that?
yeah, so they obviously had their show already before I came on board, but I
Yeah.
remember I was at 702 doing like weekend breakfast, and then so I would arrive at about 5 o'clock at 702, do a 5:30 bulletin, then I'd do the sports bulletin until about 9. Then there would be a break, and then I'd do the 1 o'clock through to 6 p.m. every weekend, and then in between, so Monday to Friday I was working as a rep for Red Bull, just calling on nightclubs and stuff.
Yeah.
It was quite a challenge. It wasn't my best moment, and then in between that, I was doing a little bit of Super Sport Blitz, and then on the weekends, so like 7 days a week, literally from I was just grafting.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I can't keep doing weekends forever. And funny enough, someone said to me, they called me out of the blue and said, Gareth Cliff's looking for a sports guy. Are you interested? And I'm like, okay, you guys are taking a piss. Someone's having a laugh. Because we all listened to Gareth at that time. And they were like, no, we're serious. Come in for audition. So I went in for an audition. I didn't see Gareth or the team the whole time. I just went and read the sport, did it, whatever. Cool, they phoned me, you got the job. And I remember walking to this breakfast table, and there's Gareth Cliff. I mean, he's at the time, he was the biggest radio star in the country. Leanne Mole, Nobali was there, Tabo. There was Rena, who was Gareth's manager and long-term manager at the time, the station manager of 5, and then there was the program manager. And I'm this like kid rocking up there going, holy shit, what is going on here? You know, so I'm dropping shit. Is that fine?
Yeah, no. You can,
I don't normally swear. You'll probably tell when I get on.
It's probably when you come to Pretoria. It's this
the
Hatfield,
right colors, eh?
the Hatfield air. The moot is just across the street.
That breeze that comes across.
Yeah.
So I hope I don't offend anyone with swearing. But I rock up at this table. I'm like, what am I doing here? That imposter syndrome starts coming through, and you're like, oh man. Anyway, so we sit down, and like the first thing Leanne says to me, she's like, oh my God, a ginger. And that's, it sort of just set off the whole thing awesome. From there. And I think the fact that I was just myself and allowed to be myself in that space, and that I was on time, I worked hard. We really got like, you know, sports stars. We interviewed the big sports stars. We had them in studio. We just clicked as a team, and it's so unique in that space to just look at someone and you almost anticipate what they're going to say. We got to that point where it was like, we had a bit of a formula, but the way the show ran, like everyone was grumpy, like 5 to 6, Leanne running in at 2 minutes past 6 when her bulletin was at 6. And then we just like clicked. And by the time it was 9 o'clock, the show was over. It was amazing. We just had an absolute blast. And it was a real honor and privilege to work with those people. And I think it was just unique that we just clicked. We just got it.
Now, after the Gareth Cliff show, did you then get another offer? What happened in that type of transition?
Yeah, so for a long time, Gareth was negotiating with the SABC. GC, sorry, I'm talking on your behalf here. He was negotiating with the SABC about the show, and they were trying to change the show to 5 a.m. to 8. It was stupid. 8, and then 8 to 10 in the morning, and have 2 different shows. And they were trying to get a 5 a.m. audience. I was like, it was just stupid. So Gareth wasn't quite happy with that. He's got a consultant that he visits in New York once a year. They fly over and go and see her. She's like the radio goddess in New York here. And she advised him to do what he felt like doing. And he was like, been toying with Cliff Central for a long time. And it got to a point where literally, so the contracts run 31 March, they end. So it's like literally 1 April to end of 31 March. So 31 March, Gareth's like, wear something nice tomorrow. And we're like, what are you talking about? He says, like, wear something nice tomorrow. It's our last show. So we literally found out at the end of the show on that day that the next day was going to be our last show.
Wow. So
from there, all of a sudden it was scrambling, like, where were people going to go? I know certain people, like,
what was the feeling hearing that initially?
We were in shock. We were like, we were flying.
Devastated?
Yeah, almost. I think so. I think like, here's my family, my other family. And I'm going like, I mean, having an absolute blast. And without that platform gave me such a huge platform and reach and opportunity to establish myself as a brand in the sports industry. And we got there, and I was like, oh well, this is crazy. I don't actually know what to do.
Yeah.
So like Barney Stinson vibes, I suited up and rocked up the next day, and I was like, I said to Gareth, I don't know if I'm ready to go with you yet. I'm having fun. And that's when opportunity came to work with Roger Good in afternoons. And what a mad, crazy, talented human being, a genius. So I worked with him. So yeah, and then it's just that's how radio works. It just kind of flows contract to contract. There's not this whole like stability that everyone. It's like, yeah, radio is great.
Yeah.
Radio is great, but it's year to year. So
Yeah.
it was a shock to the system, and I think more of a shock to the listeners.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole country went like, oh, that's it. We're done with 5FM. We're done.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was like a very difficult. And when I've actually on YouTube, I've actually got the clip where he says, "This is our last show." So I recorded it. I was like, not to put it on YouTube, but I was just for my own sentimental reasons.
Oh, okay.
And I recorded it, and he's like, starts the show, and he's like, "This is our last one, guys. So enjoy the ride." I'm like, and that's when it sunk in. You're going like, "We're done."
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding? We're done.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the life lessons I've learned in this journey is that nothing really does last forever. So the opportunity to embrace and cherish what you have at that time is so important.
Yeah. You mentioned that you guys are finishing the coverage of Banyana now. And, just with that, do you work right through the year? We also talked about it off camera. It's December. It's just like this year just flew by.
Yeah.
Do you continue to work through the festive season, through the December holidays?
Yeah. So I can't, how do I put it? I think that throughout my career, I've pretty much been a contracted freelancer or independent service provider. So if you don't work, you don't get paid. So it's always a stressful time, December, because we don't work and everyone else is on holiday and having a great time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm still pushing to find a story here or do something there. But over the years, I wear so many different hats that I also now consult to some brands and that. So over this year, we're in talks. I'll be consulting to a brand, and it's with a sporting event. So that kind of will fill up my time for December, but it adds more skills, experience, and I get to work with internationals and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a 365 sort of 24/7, and then you have to be selfish with your time. So I took the family to Orlando, Florida, for 2 weeks just to get a break because I feel if I'm in South Africa, and we have lovely places in South Africa on holiday, and yes, fortunate to be able to go overseas, but just to disconnect is a good thing sometimes. Because South Africa can be a lot at times, and just being able to turn my phone off and disappear for 2 weeks, it just recharges the batteries in a big way. So you have to be selfish with your time. You've got to learn not to chase money because we all chase money. It's just natural. But I love what I do, and I'm very fortunate that I have that motivation and passion to still do what I do. But I'm also at an age where I'm looking at all my options and where I can use my skill set and experience and apply that to a team or an organization or something like that. Like I have done media coaching with the Springbok women's team, with some of the young upcoming cricketers, Proteas women. There's a few people. So like, yeah, it's a juggling act. 365 all year.
Yeah. So your week to week is basically your year to year as well.
Pretty
it's
much.
just like very short notice, thinking on your feet. And you actually just answered one of my questions. But if you like going away with the family, just just switching off from the rest of the world, do you switch off your phone for that 2 weeks? Do you stay in touch with the teams back here in South Africa?
I would put it. I just won't look at it. So what I'll do is I'll have it. I'll still be reachable, obviously, because my dog's back home and I love my dog, so I can't not go on my dog. So I leave the phone there, and we just, and I love taking photos. So I'm always taking photos wherever we are. So I think the phone is always with me, but it's like airplane mode or whatever it is, and it's just a disconnect. I think it's important. I think mental sort of health is such a big topic that people don't talk about. And I blame social media as part of it. I know there's a lot of other things that contribute to it, and some of them are physiological, some are whatever you want. And, there's some people doing great work around mental health. But I feel it's very dangerous to be zombie scrolling.
Yes.
I think it's unhealthy. I think it sets a precedent because most of Instagram isn't real.
Yeah.
It isn't, and I think that's a dangerous precedent. So
Yeah.
I've deliberately taken a step back from social media because I don't think it's good for my mental health. Because I find myself comparing stuff. I feel chasing stuff, unattainable goals that are out there, and I just don't think it's that healthy. So to answer your question, when it's time to shut it down, shut it down. But I've also now at home, I get home, get stuff done, the phone away, and if I need to look at it, I'll look at it. Obviously, we connected with our watches and that,
Yeah.
but unless it's something urgent, I don't pay
Yeah.
attention to it. So
Awesome. And week to week, you have a busy schedule. Do you also
Sorry about that.
take small breaks? Do you guys like going on hikes and also covering so much sport? Do you enjoy doing any types of sport yourself?
Yeah, look, I think I always joke when we get to a point where we see athletes training for like you guys getting in camp, and you feel like an inferior human being when you have these athletes running around with like their shirts on and they're like flexing, and you're like, easy now,
Yeah,
easy.
yeah.
But that's their job, and it's so important for us to stay in shape. You see a lot of presenters that start off and then they put on weights as they go and they become quite large. And that's something that I've tried to avoid in my career, is to stay active, watch what I eat. Also, I think from a mental health point of view,
Yeah.
exercising is so important. If
No.
it's long walks with your dog on the golf course, or if whatever it may be, it makes a big difference. So I try and stay as active as possible. So I try and get to gym 3 times a week. I'm not out there. I tried CrossFit once for a few months and it was cool, but I was like, you have to get into that and have to commit. It's not something you can do like once a week. You have to commit. So I enjoyed that. But I played cricket at school and played SA schools. So cricket has always been something I played, and I went and played in England for a few years and that sort of thing. So cricket is something I played and really enjoyed. But as I've got older, I enjoyed sort of the gym sort of stuff. Bit of boxing. I enjoyed the boxing.
That's
I haven't rolled yet. I don't want my ears to get messed up.
Yeah. No, I think it's
that
gonna...
personal space thing too.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm like, but all respect, I mean, the jits, the grappling, the wrestling, I can see how it plays a part in your guys' preparations. Not for me. I'm happy to watch. I mean, Submission Kings is one thing that I'm emceeing, and they're doing great things there. I mean, you've seen those guys. So Justin and Elle doing a good job there, but it's important about being active, about watching what you eat, not getting smashed all the time, and just being like sort of balanced. Yeah, because I'm very privileged and fortunate to have the gig that I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned all these fun projects. You work with Big Al and Submission Kings and the UFC. That's how we got to know each other. Is there a standout project that you really are excited for every year or whenever, every month or whenever it is? Is there something that really stands out in your yearly schedule?
That's a very good question, because we get desensitized, I think, because it's, if I look at an EFC, for example, call time, you get there, we rehearse, commentators briefing, you get into the thing, and then the next thing, the event starts and it's over.
Yeah.
You can
almost go into that flow state of jumping from project to project.
Absolutely.
Without even realizing that you're actually excited for something specific, maybe a festival or whatever.
I think that's what this trip to New York did for me, was reignite that fire, actually appreciate events. Because like you say, with verses, for example, like you stress, you put your, you grafting hard to get that card out and the production done, and please that no one get hurt, and let's make a little bit of bucks or whatever it is at the end of the day. But I think just in general, I think we've become so desensitized with World Cups and the TV coverage that we have. Sport is such a huge part of our lives, but it's like we almost take it for granted a little bit. So to answer your question, I think like the UFC trip 295 was something that reignited that fire and appreciation for big events. And I think 2024 is going to be an incredible year, and hopefully in Toronto it starts off on the best of notes.
That's awesome. Do you go as part of the Monster team, or do you go as part of as Super Sports? Because you mentioned Monster when talking about the trip.
Monster and Ryan and the team invited us to go along.
Yeah.
Obviously, Supersport, I go as accredited Supersport journalist.
Yes.
So that's kind of how it works in terms of we'll do the content.
Yes.
Monster help us out with getting out there, and then in return we put that content on Supersport, and everyone sort of benefits from there.
Awesome.
So I think in this current economic climate, it's not that easy for organizations just to be flying people up and down, and we've seen it across the board. So when brands are able to come in and sort of collaborate and find that sweet spot, if I can put it that way, it works out for everyone involved. So we've just done a little 8-9 minutes of the trip that we were there, and the one day we had John Kavanagh giving a submission class to the winners of the competition.
That's sick.
Then there was Hoist Gracie, and there was Dan Henderson, and there was Gilbert Burns.
Yeah.
All these guys you see on TV, you know. I mean, I know John Kavanagh fought Bobby Caraginides here in South Africa and lost.
That's insane.
It's insane,
yeah,
right?
It's insane.
And I was like, holy crap, you know.
So Forrest Griffin actually told me a story of how he's the nicest guy in the world. Like every morning he gets to the PI, he runs the UFC Performance Institute. And then
you have to show me one day.
Yeah, we will for sure. You'll be covering with us. But he'll slide in there with these flip flops, and he's like, "Hi, how are you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm old." And he's just so relaxed. And then we were sitting having a coffee together, and he started telling me a story of how he fought here, and he couldn't remember the guy's name, but in East London.
What?
And he was here. He was like he traveled from the States because he was 19 years old.
Yeah.
They were like, listen, it's relatively cheap for us as Americans to come here. We have this opportunity for you to come fight here. And then he just took that opportunity.
Mad.
And he finished the guy in, I think, the second round. And he said like it was a really tough fight. And then he got to get to know like Rodney King and all these guys that are in the East London area that have operated there.
That's amazing.
So you'll never know that because it's not a story that's globalized, but it's so sick to know that these guys have been in our backyards as well. So
I think what blows my mind, Cameron, is I've followed your career since day one, and it's still the beginning, but like when it finally clicked for me, you had won the title with EFC, but when it finally clicked for me was when, not with winning the contract or anything, but when you actually were in the UFC, I was like, just shows that the gap is, yes, you have to have a skill set. You have to have you have to have all the attributes to be able to compete at that level. Yeah. But the gap is not that far. Like I think when EFC started and we were doing EFC 3, for example, it felt like the UFC was light years away. Yeah. Now it like really, I mean, and it's a guy like Gareth Soldier Boy, Ruan Potts, they've paved the way, right?
Yes.
But now it feels it's so much closer. So talented guys can be, and women can be rewarded for their efforts.
Yes.
And when you fought your this last fight, I was like, damn, man, you belong there. You know, even though it didn't go your way, I just thought like we belong there. You know, and you say, yes, they came to our backyard and fought here, but now we're making statements in their backyard at the biggest promotion in the world.
It's amazing.
It's so cool.
Yeah, I think like you said with the social media and the comparison, it's always like you fight here and you almost put that promotion on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And then, but when you get to travel there as well, and I do think in terms of the media, in terms of your job, I think it's very similar. Like they do everything perfectly, and which they do out of a fighter standpoint and training, they do everything perfect. But we're not far off. It's like, and in terms of structure and systems and creativity and almost thoughtfulness to whatever we do, whether it's you and your job or us, it's just like, oh, we are basically on the same level. We just need that opportunity. Yeah. We just need guys like Monster helping us going with Supersport to be there. Absolutely. And then we can make a statement. So it's really cool to see that the sports also allow us to have that opportunity.
Absolutely.
And with the year coming to a close, and you mentioned that you are part of a project, but not yet. So I'm guessing you're not allowed to mention anything.
Unfortunately, I've literally got the offer in my inbox. So I wish I could Yeah, once it's signed, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we'll brag about it afterwards. But
It's exciting
yeah,
though.
it's exciting to also have you travel with us to Canada.
Well, I can't
'cause-
wait because
yeah.
I think that for me is, and that's when I texted you before New
Yes.
York, but I didn't realize you were in hospital
Yes,
and
yeah.
I was like, you had a valid
Yes,
excuse.
and I think I read your message like 3 or 4 times. I was so drugged up. So
That's why I was like, no, it's
yeah.
cool. And then I saw, okay, wait, no, he's indisposed.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, what am I getting into? What am I so experienced? Like,
Yeah.
and I know that other journos have gone before, but they haven't been like the rights holders and been
Yes.
able to get the access that we get.
Yes.
And that's why I texted you. And now, like, it's going to be so much cooler because kind of have an idea of how things work.
Yeah.
And when you guys are there, it's case like, okay, we can get even more access
Yes.
to see what you guys in that environment, which is
Yeah.
super exciting.
Apparently, it's just going to be super cold. So we're not going to be doing a lot of walking like you did in New York.
No.
But we'll try and do fun stuff while we're in Canada as
That's
well.
going to be amazing. So
Yeah.
you guys will then go out 2 weeks before, sort of thing? Or?
Yes, yeah. I think the plan is to go about 2 weeks before. Drakus might go a little bit sooner. I'm not exactly sure. I still need to get my visa. Like, I'm already planning as if I have it in hand. But we'll speak it into existence. It's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but it's absolutely amazing to see just the absolute passion that you have, and I think with that and having that thoughtfulness to cover stories, I think that helps athletes like us a lot, you know. And thank you for what you have done, not only for our sport, but for people that are not as recognized.
Sure.
And yeah, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me on the show. And I think, you know, we tend to get carried away with our big three sports, and yes, they've done incredibly well.
Yeah.
But for me, I love being able to be involved in the smaller sports. And MMA is getting there. It's growing.
Yes.
And I mean, back in 2009 when Cairo phoned me and said, come and audition to commentate on EFC, I was like, what's EFC?
Yeah.
And look
And
where
it's
we
like,
are today.
How dare you ask me to come for an audition? Like,
No, I didn't say that, but I was like,
Kyle.
what is going on here?
Yeah.
And Dirk Stenik, I'm sitting there and we basically have EFC 1, I think it was, on the TV. And they're like, okay, go for it. I'm like, well, here we go. And so I mean, 30 odd fights, 40 fights.
Yeah,
commentated,
Yeah, sorry. I actually, how was it working with Dirk as well?
Awesome. I mean, we're still friends to this day.
Yeah.
I think what people don't realize is the amount of abuse that I got in that time, because I wasn't a purist of the sport. I was new to the sport, and coming in, I was there to anchor the broadcast and direct the conversation.
Okay.
And part of that was to learn the sport of MMA.
Yes.
But it took time.
That's quite hard if you don't know the sport.
I went straight in.
Yeah.
Literally straight in EFC 3, my first event, and Dirk was great. He helped me out a lot.
Yeah.
But the amount of abuse that I got from a handful of purists was like, I thought was so uncalled for.
Yeah.
It actually got to a point where I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Why am I wasting my time?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I didn't quit, because I learned a lot about myself. I like to challenge myself and jump into these opportunities. And jumping in there it opened my eyes to this wonderful sport we call mixed martial arts and what it takes to be successful, and the dedication. All sports require dedication, hard work. But mixed martial arts is a sport like any other sport. It's just the most unpredictable, thankless, rewarding sport in the world. So to go back there and throw myself into this unknown, and to try and sink or swim, it really paid off at the end of the day, because I got to learn about a sport. I got entrenched in the community, and I'm just so excited to see where the future is.
Yeah, awesome. But thank you for being part of our sport. Thank you for being part of the top 3 as well, because we need that too. But thank you for putting some light on smaller sports. It's really awesome. And thank you again for being on the show.
You're so welcome.
And I really look forward. And please, if you are happy with that offer and you're going to take that job, you need to let me know, because I'm actually quite curious.
I'll absolutely let you know.
Tell me off camera.
I'll let you know. But thanks. And keep up the great work. I think, I know we're running out of time here, but I think the more people that are educated about the sport of mixed martial arts, the better, because there's still a large part of the population of the world that sees it as cage fighting.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's important to stress that this is more than cage fighting. And
I cringe when people, when
but
people
it's
say
still
that,
that sort of thing. And people ask me, are you the guy from the cage fighting? I'm like, come on, have some respect, you know, like. But keep up the education, keep up being a great role model. You and Drickus and many other athletes are doing phenomenal work, and I wish you all the best, and keep up the incredible work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to go look out for Sias's podcast and whatever he is busy with, it will be in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man.
We hope you have a kick-ass time. Cheers, guys. Bye.